Someone always ate first. That was the entire point. Before the king touched a single bite of his dinner, another man already had. If that man stayed standing, the king ate. If that man collapsed, the king simply asked for a new plate and a new taster. This was the job of the royal food taster, a real, permanent position in wealthy households for centuries. Not a backup safety measure, not an emergency precaution. A full-time job with a salary, a uniform, and a daily routine that could end in slow, agonizing death. This is the story of the people whose bodies were the only test standing between a king and a poisoned meal. And by the end of this video, you will understand why dying on the job was not considered a tragedy. It was considered an occupational hazard, listed right there in the job description. To understand why this job existed, you have to understand how real the threat of poisoning actually was. In royal courts across Europe and Asia, poisoning wasn't a rare, dramatic event reserved for plays and legends. It was a genuine, constant political tool. Rivals, ambitious relatives, and foreign enemies all had access to one simple, quiet method of removing a king, queen, or noble without ever lifting a weapon in public. A slow-acting poison in a cup of wine left no witnesses, no struggle, and often no clear proof of murder at all. Because of this, wealthy households developed an entire system built around one basic principle. Never let the most important person in the room be the first one to eat or drink anything. The taster's job began long before the meal reached the table. He often watched food being prepared in the kitchen, checking for unusual smells, strange discoloration, or anything that seemed even slightly wrong. When the meal was ready, he took a small portion from each dish, in full view of the household, before it was served. Wine was treated with equal suspicion. The taster sipped from the same vessel that would later be offered to his employer, swallowing it completely rather than simply touching it to his lips. This wasn't symbolic. The poison had to actually reach his body for the test to mean anything at all. If a slow-acting poison was used, the symptoms might not appear for several minutes, sometimes longer. So, a taster's job didn't end the moment he swallowed. He stood nearby afterward, watched closely by the rest of the household, waiting to see if his own body would betray a problem nobody else could detect yet. Now, this was the part that made this job genuinely brutal, even when nothing dramatic happened. Not all poisons acted quickly or obviously. Some of the most feared substances in royal courts worked slowly, accumulating in the body over weeks, months, or even years of repeated small exposure. A taster who survived a single poison meal hadn't necessarily escaped harm. If his employer was a frequent target, he might be exposed to small, sublethal doses of poison repeatedly, again and again, meal after meal, for his entire career. Heavy metals, like arsenic and lead, were particularly insidious this way. A small amount wouldn't kill immediately, but it would slowly damage the body, causing chronic illness, organ failure, or a slow decline that looked like ordinary sickness rather than poisoning. Some historians believe certain tasters effectively absorbed years of accumulated poison on behalf of the people they served, dying slowly of conditions nobody connected to their job until much later, if ever. The position itself came with strange psychological pressure as well. Tasters had to remain completely calm and composed during every single meal, knowing that any visible fear might insult or alarm their employer, even when handed food that smelled or looked genuinely suspicious. Refusing to eat wasn't really an option. A taster who hesitated too long, or who frequently claimed food seemed dangerous, risked being seen as incompetent, paranoid, or worse, disloyal. So, many simply ate, every time, and hoped today wasn't the day someone had finally succeeded. This wasn't treated as an extraordinary burden placed on one person. It was treated as a routine, expected part of how royal households simply protected themselves. But the most disturbing part of this job isn't what happened at the table. It's what happened when a taster actually succeeded at saving someone's life, and what that household did to him next. Here is where this job reveals something genuinely uncomfortable about how these households actually valued the people protecting them. When a taster collapsed from poison meant for his employer, he had, in the most literal sense, just saved that person's life. You might expect gratitude, medical care, or some form of recognition. In many documented cases, what he received instead was considerably colder. A taster who survived poisoning was sometimes kept on, valued specifically because he now had personal experience recognizing certain dangerous symptoms early. A taster who died was simply replaced, often within the same day, by another servant willing to take the position for the steady pay it offered. His death confirmed the poison was real, which made the investigation into who sent it more urgent than any concern for the man who absorbed it. Few records exist of tasters being thanked, honored, or financially supported afterward in any meaningful way. Fewer still record their names at all. We know about specific poisoning attempts in vivid detail, because they affected kings, queens, and nobles whose lives history considered worth documenting. We know almost nothing about the individual tasters themselves, their families, or what happened to them after years of this work finally caught up with their bodies. Their value was entirely functional. They mattered while they were useful, and the moment they stopped being useful, whether through death or simple replacement, the household moved on without hesitation. This was not cruelty exactly. It was something colder than cruelty. It was indifference, built directly into the structure of the job itself. We don't do this anymore. Not even close. Today, food safety is handled by inspectors, regulations, and laboratory testing, not by a single human body absorbing the risk first. Nobody eats your meal before you to prove it's safe. But the underlying fear the taster's job was built around hasn't fully disappeared. It just changed shape. We still worry about what's in our food. We just outsource that worry to systems instead of individuals. Food labels, safety inspections, and recall notices. All of it exists because the basic question the taster answered with his own body every single day still matters to us. Is this safe to eat? We simply found a way to ask that question without asking one specific person to risk their life answering it for us. Meal after meal, for years. The taster's job disappeared because we built better systems, not because the fear that created the job ever truly went away. Here's what I actually want to know. If you had to choose between the taster's job, knowing exactly what you were risking every single meal, or living without any food safety system at all today, which fear would actually be worse to live with? Tell me honestly in the comments. This is just one job where surviving the day was the entire performance review. There are more like it sitting quietly in history, waiting to make you grateful for the boring safety systems you never think about. You already know where to find the rest of them.